50 minutes.
Okay.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Mi Gente on Air. It is October 1st, 2024, and we're here in the live studios at Alpha Media, and we are going to be broadcasting on Sunday at 8 p.m. on 100.5 and 790 a.m. simultaneously. But today we're here on the live stream on social media platforms, and I'm really excited to do this historic show. And I say historic because it's going to be historical in regards to commemorating President Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday today, October 1st, 1924 was when he was born. Can you believe that? And so we're going to have a guest who was part of the Union Civica Mexicana back in the day when President Carter came. Well, he wasn't President Carter then. He was stomping to be president in the election in November, but he came September 16th, 1976, and Elena Sanchez and her daughter Ana Sanchez are here tonight to uh, reminisce about that particular day when President Carter came to the Union Civica Mexicana. So join us here in the live room. If you got a question or you got a concern, please put it in the chat room, and I will try to read it to our guests as well as make it part of our show, because this is Mi Gente on Air, and that means my people. So that includes all of you who will be watching in the live stream. So join me tonight here on Mi Gente on Air.
Welcome to Mi Gente on Air on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online WSGW.com. Now, here is your host, Larry Rodarte.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Mi Gente on Air. And we are hearing the sounds of Michael Salgado. And although this song, Cinea, has nothing to do with the program tonight, I just thought it sounded good and it would put me in the mood, because we're talking about a historical show tonight. It's going to be history in the making as we commemorate President Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday today. He made it October 1st, 2024, and he was born, of course, in 1924. Can you believe it? And my guests tonight are two individuals who are part of the Latino community of Saginaw, who was around back on September the 16th, 1976. Let me say that again, September the 16th, 1976, when we celebrate Mexican Independence Day. And these individuals were part of the group of people who welcomed Jimmy Carter to the Union Civica Mexicana on that day when he broadcast to the nation about stomping as he was as a presidential candidate. And so I just want to read a few words here about that memorable day. Felicidades, President Jimmy Carter, first of all, first and foremost, celebrating 100 years. It was quite a memorable day nearly 50 years ago when candidate James Earl Carter came to Saginaw to stomp for the U.S. presidency. It was a memorable day for Saginaw's Mexican-American community as he made a visit to La Unión Cívica Mexicana at 2715 Wadsworth on September 16, 1976. It was Mexico's Independence Day, and the broadcast to the nation from the Civica was quite an amazing feat, where a flag-waving, sign-hoisting crowd of about 400 cheered him on when he began his remarks in Spanish, congratulating on Mexican Independence Day and concluding with cries of Viva la Raza and Viva Mexico, according to the Saginaw News. La Unión Cívica Mexicana proudly remembers this day and salutes President Jimmy Carter with a happy 100th birthday today as America's longest living president. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a historical show as we talk about that historic visit. And if anybody has come to the Unión Cívica Mexicana, they will see pictures of that famous visit because the Saginaw News gifted those pictures of that historic day to the Civica many years ago, and we proudly display them. And my guest tonight here in the room with me is Ana Sanchez. She an individual who remembers that day specifically and she felt it was very important to go and celebrate with President elect Carter. Well, he wasn't even president elect yet. He was stomping still as a presidential Democratic nominee. So please help me welcome Ana Sanchez. How are you, Ana?
Hi, Larry. I'm doing pretty good.
Well, thank you for being with me here on such a short notice today. I was just kind of thumbing through Facebook earlier, and I saw that President Carter made it to his 100th birthday, and I said, "Oh my gosh, we have to do a show on that because it was such a historic. It was probably the most historical." Significant visit that any individual who came to the Civica came to, it really was a special day for those that were in attendance. And so I wanted to invite you and your mother, who were part of that day, and your grandfather was the one who was instrumental in actually bringing him to the Union Civica. The late Alfonso Brillo was a president of the Civica, although he wasn't president at that time. He was a president at one point in its history. So tell me a little bit, Anna, kind of who you are for my guests that may not know you, and especially to the non-Latinos who may be listening on Sunday evening.
Well, I'm a Saginaw native. I was born and raised here. I graduated from Eisenhower High School in 1980. I graduated from Central Michigan and was a teacher. I am now a retired teacher, but have always was raised in a home with union beliefs, political beliefs, just to be involved and make sure you vote. Your vote is important. And I even did a lot of that kind of work when I was local president of the Pontiac Education Association when I was teaching down in Pontiac. But since I've retired, I've moved back up here, and I'm currently living with my mom and enjoying every minute of it.
All right. That's a nice thing to say, right, Maria Elena? Her mother is a friend of mine as well, Maria Elena Sanchez. And her father, like I said, was Alfonso Riz, the late Alfonso Riz. And Maria Elena was a Civica Queen back in 1956. And she will be on the show in the latter half talking about her memories as well of that historic day. So, Jimmy Carter, 100 years old. What do you think about that, Anna?
Well, it is historical, as you said earlier, and I actually looked him up the other day just out of curiosity, and I guess I didn't even clue in that he was going to be 100 until I saw it again myself today. But I just have always regarded him as a not even just president or as president, but he and his wife Rosen had done so much volunteer work. I mean, he was known as the negotiator. I mean, even after he had fallen and had a cut on his head, had multiple stitches, he still went out that day and worked for Habitat for Humanity. I mean, the
Yes.
man, I mean, until he got the cancer and is now in hospice, I mean, he was busy up until that happened. I mean, it's just amazing how much he's given to our country, even beyond being president.
Yeah, yeah, and when we look at today, the polarization within the political realm with our current president and the past president before him, his predecessor, it's just amazing to me when you look back at 1976, and I'm old enough to remember, President Carter, President Ford, especially, after Nixon was resigned, they really brought dignity to the White House in a way that we just didn't see when 45 was president. And I know President Joe Biden, he has also tried to bring that dignity back to the White House. And hopefully, we're going to see in November that continue on because I don't see that with 45. And I say that, and I'm not afraid to say it because, it's the truth. That is the truth. And so, we're really talking about President Carter, and you talk about his stance with humanity, Habitat for Humanity, and he was somebody who I believe won the Nobel Peace Prize, wasn't it?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is a man who gave his life to his country, and I know that he went into hospice for probably over a year ago, and he has still lasted all this time. And his family was hoping that he would make his 100th birthday, even though he has really gone downhill, especially when we saw him at the funeral of his wife Rosalind Carter earlier. I think it was this year, or was it earlier
Last year,
last year? Yeah, it's
2023.
time is just flying, and it's so nice to know that a gentleman like Jimmy Carter, who I remember back in '76 when he said, my name is Jimmy Carter and I'm running for president. You remember that?
Yeah. Well, he was a true humanitarian. I mean,
Yes.
I don't think he's known for or have been believed to be one of the best presidents ever, but he was such a humanitarian that he continued to work beyond the presidency. I mean, he was a peanut farmer. I mean, it was, and he never forgot that. And when I realized it was his 100th birthday, I went online, and if you can go ahead and take a digital tour of his presidential library and museum, and because he was turning 100, students all over the country have made birthday cards for him, and you gotta look at them. They're really really cute. I guess that's the teacher in me, but so there was the winners of those entries. I think it's going to create some postcards in memory of his works.
Wow, that's great. And I'm glad that you informed my listening audience about that, because even I will go and look at that virtual birthday celebration that I'm sure that they're having at the Presidential Library today. And, yeah, you have to wonder, he was, like you said, he's a peanut farmer. I wonder if that has attributed to his longevity as a human, and 100 years from, I think he was from Georgia. Was it Plains, Georgia?
Planes, yep, that's
Yes,
it.
yes. So, wow, isn't it amazing, Anna, that after all these years, we're talking probably about 50 years from when he came onto the scene, that you and I can remember those headlines and those radio announcements. And, it was a big thing when President Carter came onto the scene after the President Ford, took over when Nixon resigned. So I mean, it really was a time, and I remember it quite vividly. It was also the bicentennial year of the USA, 200 years, and here we are almost at 250. I think it will be in about 2 years that we would celebrate that. But kudos to President Carter for being such a humanitarian. And as you said, he isn't renowned as one of our great presidents, but he seemed to have a lot of respect through his later years in the work that he did to volunteer and to bring that attention to different issues that were affecting the world. And so I think that's really, really special that he came to Saginaw stomping in 1976. And what is your memory of that day when he came to the Unión Cívica Mexicana? Tell me about, and I know that I have asked you this before with your cousin Gloria, when I was interviewing when we were honoring your grandfather, and you had quite some stories. And so I'd like for you, as best you can, to share some of that.
Well, I had just turned 14 earlier that summer, and I know it was a weekday, and I mean, we never skipped school. We were never pulled out of school, but we were able to stay out of school that day. And we went down there, and I just remember wearing our green sweatshirts with the big peanut on it, because obviously it was back to his peanut farming. And I just remember that there was a lot of excitement. I remember being up front in the front row it was an outdoor event, and the podium was set outside, and he was speaking, and of course very impressive all the Secret Service that was around, and my dad happened to be there too. I don't know if he had to take the day off from work or whether it was a scheduled day. I just don't remember. But he took videos. Back then, it was 8 millimeter family film type stuff, and no voice to it. But he was there filming the whole event. Besides all the other cameras that were there, this is home video, and it was just excitement. I mean, it was exciting to be there, and like I said, we had the sweatshirts on. The Secret Service were there, and it was there were I don't know if how well you're gonna be able to see this little pin, but this is a lapel pin. Oops, let me put it in the right spot, and it says Carter on it. And it's on the shape of the
It's a
peanut.
peanut.
Yeah. So
Pretty funny.
my mom actually saved that, and So I wish we had one of the sweatshirts. I don't I It's hard to believe we would have gotten rid of it. And it actually, when you're 14, you don't realize sometimes the importance of something until much later. And then, of course, my grandpa, he was Alfonso Ruiz. He was at the time, if memory serves correct, if I heard my mom right, is that my grandpa was like the chairperson uh, the of the actual festivities day, and so that's how he worked on having him come. And because he was the chairperson of that committee, he was the one that was able to give President Carter a sombrero and welcomed him into the Saginaw, presented him with a sombrero, probably gave a few words at the time, and so it was just cool. I mean, for one thing, here's a person running for president that you see on TV, and you're less than inches away from him when he's shaking hands, and then you're like, wow. I thought that was impressive at the time, but even today, you can't get very close to people anymore because of the Secret Service and the safety of the candidates. But it was pretty fun, and I have no doubt that I had to go to school and eventually give my social studies, my government teacher, Mr. Weineke, Bob Weineke, a,
A
a
report.
story as to what had happened. Why was I at a school that day, and what all happened, and he was into politics too. I mean, he was on the Saginaw City Council, and he was so he. I know he would appreciate it hearing it. So I'm no doubt I had to give some sort of oral little report over there at school, but it was exciting. I mean, it's exciting today to do something like that. So you can only imagine a 14-year-old seeing all these adults and cameras and people clapping, and then you're in the front row. So
Wow, wow, that is quite a memorable moment for you in your lifetime. And kudos to your grandfather, the late Alfonso Ruiz, because to be able to snag up a presidential candidate, the Democratic nominee for the president of the United States in 1976. I mean, that really speaks volumes to his connections, because he had to have known somebody. And I think your mom will talk a little bit more about that. But
I was
uh,
just gonna say that my mom's got that link. She's gonna let you know, you and your audience know about that link. So.
Yeah, and it's amazing that the president actually spoke to the nation on September 16th, when he was really reaching out to the Latinos throughout the United States for that vote at that time, because to broadcast to the nation and talk about Mexican Independence Day and Viva la Raza, the what the Saginaw News reported, that's really saying something. I don't recall that another presidential candidate had come to Saginaw that I know of, and maybe the audience out there will know differently. But and, it's kind of ironic today, when former President Trump will be at Saginaw Valley State University tomorrow, stomping for the presidency, and then Kamala Harris will be in Flint on Friday. So it's like kind of full circle here with us here. And tell me, Anna, what would your grandfather say at a pivotal moment in history today?
Well, my mom and I were just talking about this. And boy, if Victor was here, he'd be sitting across the table just going like this, like, "Yep, you're right there. You're still in it." And the one thing that we've always said, we don't we've not we're not influencers by any imagination of the word, but it's main thing is you gotta get out and vote. You got to
Yeah.
get out and vote. Here's another pin that was worn back then. Su voto es su voz. Your vote is your voice, and whether you're for one candidate or another, it's important to be out there and be heard. And if you can't campaign, if you can't make phone calls, if you don't have a yard sign, go vote. Just go vote. Be a participant in democracy.
Yeah, yeah. And my colleagues over there at the Castle Museum pulled out some of these articles for me today from the Saginaw News of that historic visit. And it says
Mm-hmm.
Carter pledges support to Latin American area. They were in the Saginaw News saying Latin American area, and there was a part two as well. So it was pretty big,
Yeah,
news.
that's my grandpa right there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. there is. Yeah,
Yeah.
there he goes. Well, it's really something to be here talking about it today. I remember when it happened. I didn't attend. I was too young. I was probably like 10 and didn't care to attend. But I know my Aunt Della Chintaka was there. I know Mr. Miguel Luna was there. I see him in some of the pictures. Augustine Banda, I believe, was there as well, and was in actually the dignitary from the Civica that welcomed President Carter, because the president at the time was Gilberto Olivares, and he, for some reason, went to go and pick something up or something, and he wasn't there when the actual arrival happened. I remember them telling me that story. So it's a lot of historical leaders were there, present, and as the Saginaw News reported, 400 people, came to the Civica that day, and that's quite a big crowd for that little for the hall, historic Civica, I call it today. And if you look at some of the pictures, and I don't know if my producer can put some of those on there. There's some pictures of the Civica building where Carter's. I'm not exactly sure if it's on the side of the building or the front of the building. Maybe you got.
That's the front of the building.
Okay, that's the front. Well, if you look at it, there's actually a mural on that part of the
Yes.
building that I don't remember being there, but I'm sure that it was painted by the late artist David Torres. And so that's really something to see. And it even has lettering at the top there, Unión Cívica Mexicana.
Hmm.
That is no longer there. And as you said earlier, look at the Secret Service that are around there. This is all on 2715 Wadsworth. And so this is what part of the reason why many people will hear me say and talk about the historic Civica, which was built in 1960. And do you recognize anybody in that picture there, Anna?
Well, other than President Carter and the very handsome Secret Service guy that I remember telling my sister about.
You remember that? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the individual next to President Carter.
I don't recognize him. My mom might. I don't recognize him.
I believe that's Augustine Banda, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
see
Yeah.
my grandfather standing a little bit further off to the side. He's up by the mural.
You see
That's
his
him right there.
panza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, but yeah,
President.
that was quite the day, and I know that I did some of my own little research on that day, and that day, no, I take that back. The night before, Carter had been in Dearborn, and he had spent
Mhm.
the night there, and then flew into Saginaw that day, and then flew out to I think it was Illinois or Wisconsin. So he only had two stops in Michigan in those 2 days, and Saginaw was one of them. So it just goes to show you the importance that they saw in Saginaw. So.
Yeah, isn't that something? And it's really nice to know that we're thought of here in the Saginaw Valley. It was called in those days.
Hmm.
Remember the Tri Cities in the Saginaw Valley. Well, it's really like I said, the day that is goes down in history is probably the most important for the Unión Cívica Mexicana, which will be celebrating 80 years next year in 2025, and that happened in 1976. So that's 48 years ago this year when the nominee, Democratic nominee, I got to keep saying that because he wasn't president yet, but we can call him President Carter because that's, who he will always be referred to as now as President Jimmy Carter. And, to celebrate 100 years is quite amazing. And I think that's why we are talking about him today. I don't know if he didn't celebrate a birthday, if we would be talking about that historic day in Saginaw, but it just goes hand in hand because there are people in our area that are still alive and remember it, like your mother and yourself. And it truly was a special day because he was targeting that Latino vote. And I don't even know, this had to be before when they talked about the sleeping giant has awakened. And,
Mm.
I think there were at that time, I read in an article, there was 4 million Latinos in the United States in 1976. And that has vastly grown over, to present day 2024.
Well, I
So
think even the article that you had before you, I did read it earlier today. I think even it says 18,000 Hispanics in the Saginaw area, or
wow.
at least in that article alone. So I don't know how accurate that was, but that's what was reported at the time.
Yeah, and I do believe it is pretty accurate because I I am, journalist that came out of the Saginaw News with an intern, and I remember how,
Okay.
they were, very particular about facts and all. And I
Mhm.
remember at one point, I think later in the '90s when I was an intern there, that our percentage was about 16% in the community, and as we have lost population, that may have dwindled. But at that point in 1976, 18,000 Latinos in the Tri-Cities area, I think, or the city of Saginaw. I'm not sure which one, but that was quite a big population, and that's pretty amazing. We're here talking about the presidential elect visit. I keep saying that wrong. It's the Democratic nominee who came to the city of Saginaw, President Jimmy Carter, in 1976. And my guest today is Ana Sanchez. And when we come back from commercial, we're going to talk more with her mother, Maria Elena Sanchez, who vividly remembers that day and will be giving us some historic information as well. So don't go anywhere. No te vayas. I will see you back here on Mi Gente on Air.
This is Mi Gente on Air on WSGW.
So, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight here on the live stream. This is going to go down as a historic show, I'm sure. And it's just good information to know and recount that specific day when, somebody of President Carter's statue came to the Union Civica Mexicana. I know that Cesar Chavez came to the Civica Hall. Dolores Huerta, I know, also came. There has been some other dignitaries through the years. Many of the Tejano artists have come there as well. And, so I think, when we look at the scheme of it all, this was really an important day because, it was in 1976, the bicentennial year, when the Democratic nominee came to the Saginaw area and chose the Union Civica to visit. So we're gonna go back into the show, and my guest is going to be Maria Elena Sanchez. Please, if you got any comments and all, I know that there are individuals that are watching, and if you got any questions, because I know that one of the things when people come to the Civica, they do ask me, is there any historical pictures or documents that you have? And I always take them to the board where we do have outside of the office pictures of this historic visit that the Saginaw News. They took a lot of pictures and they gifted it to the Civica, and it still is out there today. I make sure that it's still out there, and so they can see the different pictures of in the people of its time in 1976. And believe it or not, it's almost 50 years ago. So we're going to go back in the show, and we're going to talk more with the Sanchez family when we return to Mi Gente on Air.
You're listening to Mi Gente on Air on WSGW.
Good evening. Welcome back. Welcome back. I am your host this evening. My name is Larry Rodarte, and I am the guest. My guest, I should say, is Maria Elena Sanchez. I wanted to say my name is Maria Elena Sanchez. Maria, I want you to move over to your right a little bit because you're a little bit out of the camera. Yep, there we go. And I'm so excited to have you here to tell us the historic day. And, this is from the mouth of the former Civica Queen in 1956. And just tell us a little bit about your background, though, and as Ana did in the beginning of the show.
Okay. Thank you, Larry, for thinking of us. Well, my background is I'm a San Antonio girl, San Antonio, Texas. And my mom and dad and my sister and I, Maria de Lourdes, we came to Saginaw in 1946. And they came with a contract to work for the chicory farmers up in the Thumb area. And that particular year, the chicory crop was not very good. So once they were done with their commitment, they recommended we come to Bay City or Saginaw to find other work. So that's how we ended up in Bay City and then eventually in Saginaw. And I my sister and I both went to the old Potter School, and then Prairie Lincoln, and then junior high, and then eventually graduated from Saginaw High. And of course, that was a long time ago. But my father and mother, more my father than my mother, although my mother also was, you could say, one of the children of the revolution, the Mexican Revolution. So a lot of that generation did not have a lot of formal schooling or formal education. So my dad was a reader, and I didn't know until after he had passed that he used to send for books in El Paso from the library to read by the light of a candle. So he was a self-made man, but he was very interested in civic affairs, and we always talked politics, and he could tell you the politics of the world. So anything political. So anyway, he was a UAW member, and in later years, we formed the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. And that's where Hank Lacayo came in. He was a director, he's deceased now, but he was a national director of the UAW Community Action Program, the CAP program. And also one of his other national capacities was being the chairman of the National Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. And it encompassed a lot of union members all over the country, from the AFL-CIO, steelworkers, laborers, you name it. So the time came to establish a chapter here in Michigan. Well, in Michigan, yes, but in Saginaw also. So some of the people that headed that up was Salvador Luna. He was the chairman at one time, and Dave Hinojosa. Of course, Salvador was UAW. Dave Hinojosa with laborers. Dave Acevedo, he was with service employees. And of course, my father and my husband, we were all founding members. There were other people, I just can't remember all the names in order. So eventually, I became a board member for the National Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. And in 1976, I was an actual at-large delegate to the Presidential Nominating Committee convention in New York City. And so I was one of the people that placed Jimmy Carter's name in nomination for the candidacy for the President of the United States.
Wow, Elena.
Yeah.
That's quite a feat, huh?
Well, we were active. Our whole little family was active. I used to go up and down the precinct with my children and the baby carriage, passing out, get out the vote leaflets. And we were always doing something for the community at the time, mostly on a civic level like that. So what happened was that Hank Lacayo called, and he knew where to reach me because I worked for the UAW for 30 years at the regional office here in Saginaw. And so he wondered where in Saginaw would be an appropriate place for the candidate to come. And so he mentioned a couple of churches, some kind of a community center. And I said, well, the place would be the Unión Cívica Mexicana. And then I explained to him why, which is a lot of the history you've already talked about. So he actually got a hold of the Unión Cívica Mexicana. He got a hold with the UAW people already were aware of the intention for the campaign to come here. And then the decision was made that, yes, indeed, it was Unión Cívica Mexicana. What I don't quite remember, I know Mr. Agustin Vanda was a president at one time. And you mentioned another gentleman that was president at this particular day, and I don't recall him. But be that as it may, my father was the chairman of the festival committee, so that was the protocol, that he was the one to welcome. And then Mr. Vanda also had remarks at the gathering. So that's the way it was. And at the gathering, a lot of community people, Salvador and the LACLA chapter and the labor community, they sent the word out to the community. And we were very pleased to be able to get the queen and her court, and they dressed up in their gowns. And I think we had some mariachis there, but I don't remember who got the mariachis there. And it was quite a festive event. Very nice. Very,
Yes,
very.
yes. I do see and have pictures of some of the mariachis that were there, and from my recognition, I do recognize Pablo Gonzalez, who was part of the Civica in later years, but at that time, I think he was one of the mariachi players.
Well, probably no doubt Mr. Gonzalez was a very good musician too.
Yes,
And
yes.
yeah, there's so many people that really contributed to the event. But most people at the time, I don't think, realized, like you said, that former President Carter was going to address all Hispanics in the entire nation. And he made it from the Civica in Saginaw. And one of the uh, unusual things that people don't think about, which I didn't either at the time, when we were making the arrangements, they said, we need a person, we need a very reliable person to stay at the phone continually. That person will not meet the candidate and will not see anything going on. They just have to be by the phone. And of course, at the time, we said, okay. And you know who volunteered to do that? Irene Irene Guerrero Alba. And
Oh,
so, yeah, my comadre Irene, she sat by the phone and she did that duty. And it was so important because that that phone was connected to the campaign, to all the different service people, secret service people, and different things going on with the campaign.
Well, this is before texting, Larry.
yeah. This was
Right.
before all social media and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
actually, when we talked about that, he broadcast to the nation. It was through radio, and they had well, there's pictures where he's actually talking into, a radio microphone that's connected to a machine. So I mean, it really actually was way before the current cell phone usage and any of you know the technology that we have today. So it really was a historic time. Go ahead, keep going. I love hearing your stories, Maria.
Well, you can remember snippets and snippets, but right here is, let me see,
Yeah.
where can I put that? Talk about the Secret Service. That is my Secret Service pin. I didn't know I had to have a pin, but I guess I was okay to do what I was doing because the Secret Service cleared me. I was an okay person. So, but I still have that, and I have a whole box of campaign uh, buttons of different kinds, different campaigns, and one of the things.
The question is when do we, the Union Cívica Mexicana, uh, get possession of these historic items for the for the Castle Museum? Because I think the Castle Museum someday down the road may do an actual exhibit on
Okay.
this historic day with these types of items.
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, I know my daughter contacted you a few weeks ago on another matter, but it had to do with the historic files. And so, no, I'm with you on that. And yes, that would be very nice to do. Um, so anyway, let me see. There were, I know that from here, he was going to another state. Well, he was on the campaign trail. But anyway, so the Secret Service people were here in advance. They used to call them advanced people. So you may as well say they checked everything out, and then the flyers and the announcements and any publicity going out for the candidate. And the people that came with him was Henry Lacayo from the UAW, and gosh, it was a dozen national Hispanic leadership people. Um, I never got all their names. Some were from LACLA, from different labor unions, presidents and secretary treasurers of different unions. So anyway, that was very important, and I was very glad to be able to take some time off from work and do this volunteer work.
Well, at that time in 1976, you mentioned that the mariachis were there as well as the Civica Queen in her court. And I do believe in 1976, the queen at that time was Bernarda Castillo,
Oh,
who is, part of the La Estrella bakery family here in
right.
Saginaw.
Yeah,
Bernarda and her sister went on to be queen as well after her the following year. And the
yeah,
queen before that was somebody who's very active today at the Union Cívica Mexicana, and that is Teresa Castillo. So we had three Castillos in a
yeah,
row. They weren't all related, but that's what was happening in 1975, 76, and 77.
yeah.
And
Well, I happen to remember the elder Mrs. Castillo, the grandparents of all these kids that you're talking about, and the parents of Pedro and Celestino and those people. Yeah,
wow.
they were here a long time ago. As a matter of fact, um, talk about the Ruiz family, but the Sanchez family, probably more like yours, they've been here a long, long time. The elder Mr. Edineo Sanchez, he's been deceased for 100 years, and he died in 1924. But so he had been here since we believe 1919. So when you talk of a century and we connect it to President Carter, that is a long time. I mean, God has given him a long life, and we appreciate all he did for us. And you can never do enough, and you can't do everything. But he certainly has been a kind, decent gentleman, and respectful, and stayed with his uh, devotion to his farm.
Yeah.
So he's just a good all around person, and I'm happy to join your congratulations of him for his 100th birthday. And yes, we do have additional items and mementos that we will be glad to make available to you and the Saginaw County Historical Museum.
Yeah, and I know that at one point you were on the board as well at the Castle Museum.
Yes.
So that's gotta hold some clout. And, I remember talking with you in 2017, 2018 when we were going to honor your father, Alfonso Ruiz,
Uh-huh.
for the Saginaw Hispanic Hall of Fame. And I remember at that time, Anna told me that there was video footage from back in that day, and we were supposed to pull it out then.
Yes,
And here we are 6 years later. We really need to find that because
I
that would
know.
be wonderful in an exhibit.
Well,
All the historical pictures and documents that we have.
Well, it started off on 8 millimeter. We're just not sure if it ever got to VHS, and we know for a fact it's not on CD. So it's going to take some effort.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've recently done that with my family's videos and stuff, and I had to actually find somebody who had one of those projectors, those old projectors that you
Hmm.
needed the film into, and it's pretty. It's a process. So just find the main thing is just find the actual film if you
Yeah.
can, and
Right.
we'll worry about that later. John Sanchez, I believe, is your son, brother here, and he says that President Carter was actually the first um, U.S. president born in a hospital. So that was in
Oh, I didn't
1924.
know that.
Yeah, I didn't know. I said, give
Just
me more,
wasn't.
John. And he also says he's believed to be the first president to live in public housing. So
Oh,
wow, that's
yeah,
really something. And
yeah,
to know the history of this president and Rosalind Carter, I would love to go to that presidential library and
that
claim
would be
my work.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be
yeah.
very nice.
And it would be nice to be able to give them copies of the pictures and some of the stuff that we have from Saginaw, Michigan.
Yeah, yeah.
He was probably the first president ever to actually address the Hispanic community in the
And
United States.
Saginaw. Yeah.
We
In the
know
United States.
if you go to the virtual museum site, you can see up on I'm going to say like the second and third floors all his archives, and I have no doubt that there are probably pictures of that event
There.
that are there already. That would be nice to know what they have that we don't have.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the picture that I have where they're putting a sombrero on his head. I mean
Yeah.
that's saying something, and that was pretty. He was smiling from ear to ear, and he was just joyful of that occasion, and to know that you guys were out there with signs that said Saginaw loves Jimmy Carter. I see that in some of the pictures.
Hmm.
Mexican American community loves Jimmy Carter, and then you're over there wearing the green sweatshirt with a peanut on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there any other memory you have, Maria Elena, in terms of how he, I guess, the trajectory of how he actually got here to Saginaw, with the connections as we talked earlier. I know it was your father who was on the committee, the welcoming committee and all, but what was that actual connection? It was you as a delegate in New York?
Well, that could be. Like I mentioned before, I had been elected to the National Board of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, and that's where Hank Lacayo also served. And so he was aware that I was an officer at large of the Michigan Democratic Party. And that's not to say that other people were not active, but I believe that was the original connection. And then, as far as my father was concerned, like I said, protocol was that he was the chairperson for the festival that year. So that worked out very well. So I was glad that he was able to be included. And if not, he would have been fine with that too. He just was very happy that we could do something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, it's kind of ironic, like I said, that we're sitting here on the eve of when the presidential candidates are coming to our area, and it's really speaks volumes to your father and what he did in that
Yeah.
historic time. And Larry Arguin, who is he's a chairman for Latinos for Kamala Harris, out of Detroit, and he's been working real closely with some of the Latino leaders locally, to get the vote out for Kamala Harris. And they just had Monday night, which was yesterday. They just had, an event to bring in more people to vote for Kamala Harris through the efforts of the Latinos for Kamala Harris. That was held at Maria's restaurant. So,
Oh, okay.
it's just kind of funny how this is all kind of came to be today here on Mi Gente on Air, and when we're looking back at that historic times, and here we are in one of the most important elections of our lifetime. And within November's going to come real quick. Look how fast September went, and now we're already October 1st. And we don't have much time, but what's important, I'm not saying who to vote for, whatever, what is important. And I think of when your father was inducted into the Saginaw Hispanic Hall of Fame, and how you guys said that evening he would be up there, getting up there as the great orator that he was, and say, make sure you vote and get out the vote. And
Right,
isn't
right.
that something that
Well,
he,
he and my mother, they both became citizens of the United States. And so they were able to vote in their later years. And I hope that some people that are listening can, if they're not already in the process of becoming citizens, that they process their paperwork and be ready for the next election. And I know that it was very comforting for them to know that they could do this. And I'm sure that other people can too. And right now it's encourage everybody to get out the vote.
yeah, yeah, and it's so important for anybody who may have somebody who has just turned 18. My nephew Marcelina Rodarte is turning 20 years old today. Today's his actual
Ooh,
birthday. He's 20 years old, and I got to make sure that he's going to get out there and vote along with his brother Angel, because I think it's so important. As your father instilled within you and your children the importance of voting. All of us
that's
should get out
great.
there and exercise that right, because we, in our ancestral line, we didn't always have that privilege. And your parents, my grandparents, they all came over as immigrants, and they exercised that. My grandfather Joseph V. Diaz also was very big on voting in education. So I mean, that's really something. Su voto es su voz. That is what that pin is saying from the 1976 visit of presidential nominee elect presidential nominee Democratic nominee stomping here in Saginaw, Michigan, Jimmy Carter. So I mean that really is nice piece of paraphernalia that you have there. That I hope will be given to the Civica and then eventually to the Castle Museum. You like how I said that?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, no, like I said, that's what I wanted to get in touch with you for some more historical information that I have come through my files.
Yeah. Well, do you remember you came to the Civica and we talked a little bit about this actual giving of information on it, and then COVID hit, and
That's right.
we just like totally forgot about it. And yeah, I'm so glad you're reminding me now because it's important. I am right now working with Sandy Schwann from the Castle Museum, and she is taking many of the documents from 1945, historical documents, and I have binders of that information. And I know I talked with Anna about this before, where they are scanning each of these binders at the Castle
Oh,
Museum so that
wow.
they are preserved and go down for prosperity in the city of Saginaw. And
Yeah.
I know that at one point, Michigan State University, the Cesar E. Chavez Library, also wanted these documents. I think they will get copies if they're willing to accept them because I kind of wanted them to stay in the city of Saginaw. And so that one of the curators at the time, she said to me, Diana Rivera, she said, nobody has this kind of documentation from those days.
Right.
And applause to our founders back in 1945 and those leaders who preserved this information. I actually even have the very first book that documented all the queens that first when they had the contest for queens and where people were giving 25 cents in order to vote. That's how they actually inducted a queen in this Union Civica. So
Right.
well, thank you so much for being with me tonight. We've run out of time, and it's just wonderful to talk about this historical visit of President Carter to the Union Civica Mexicana in 1976. My guest tonight is Maria Elena Sanchez and her daughter Ana Sanchez, who were there, and they were there to campaign for Jimmy Carter and get out the vote. And we're saying get out the vote today in 2024. We've got less than I think less than 45 days until the election, and so it's so important to get your vote, get registered, and get your vote for the candidate of your choice. So
And congratulations, Tigers, for a win today.
Yes, did you see that? Yes, and the Lions are doing wonderful
And the
too.
Lions
So we'll see you
yesterday.
next week here on Mi Gente on Air.
Thank you.
It's really something. When we talk historical information about the
I
Civil
take
War and
it we're
Saginaw in
off the
general,
air
I
now,
can
right?
keep talking and talking. And Anna, you did a wonderful job in in your recollection of that historic day as well. Man, your mom had the information, didn't she? She did really well. Thank you, Maria Elena and Ana Sanchez, for being with me here tonight. Is there any other afterthought that you're thinking about from that time that we can also give to the live stream before we sign off completely?
Oh, gosh. No.
Just for the Hispanic community to maintain the enthusiasm of democracy and to get out the vote and just to participate. I mean, just otherwise the founders of our community are forgotten if we don't carry on their legacies and their enthusiasm for democracy and to be a part of the United States and to fulfill their dreams of their families being better off than they were before.
Nicely said. And it's so important that we look at today, the democratic process because it has been threatened and recently. And I don't know if you or I would have ever thought we would have seen that in our lifetime. When we look back at 1976 and how young we were and how politicians were looked upon, I'm sure they were looked upon kind of badly as well because we had just come off of Richard Nixon and what had happened there. But I never thought that we would see the polarization that we have in our country today, and it really has. We've come a long way in the wrong way, and I think we are not going back. Right?
Well, the funny thing is, again, you don't realize that you're getting a lesson in democracy until much later. I remember as my mom said, that my grandmother did not have a lot of formal education, but I'll tell you what, when the hearings were being held in Washington on Watergate, we would come home from school and my grandmother was sitting there watching those on television as they unfolded, and she didn't know very much English at the time, but all I could think of was that she had come from a country that maybe did not have participation the way we do here. But I think she was probably in awe as a wow, this that really happens to leaders in countries where democracy means something. And to this day, when I watch the movie All the President's Men, I think of my grandmother. I mean, I've always enjoyed politics. I've always enjoyed knowing what was going on. I've enjoyed the union work. I never thought I'd run for office, and when I did, I was surprised I won. I mean, but it just went on from there. And every time I took another step forward, it was because of my mom and my dad and my grandparents and the strength and resiliency it took for them to leave their country to come here to an unknown, to some of them die because of the weather and flu and pneumonia, and still stay in hopes that their family would be advanced and that they would reap the benefits of a democracy. So it's just I say it's just been ingrained, and it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just I could cry. So
Yeah. In our generation, Nana, we are the American dream. We are what they dreamt about. So
that's why we can't let it go. We
yeah,
can't let it
yeah.
go.
And just thank you so much for you and your mom being there, kind of, the angels and the wings of the Civica, and supporting it through the years that I've been involved, all these years, and you kind of kept me in check, in regards to things. And that's also inclusive of Gloria, your cousin, Gloria Munoz. And it's important because not everybody always knows the history, or no, I don't want to say respect, but they don't always acknowledge the history of the Union Civica, which is very important in our community, because we are at the table. We're at the
Well,
table.
and I know we're not sitting here trying to pat each other's back, but I often sit here and watch you as you take out the food truck and you have the events. I think, today's Civica is not the way it was back then, but nor should it be. I mean, it has to evolve with the community, it has to evolve with the population. And just the fact that you're keeping the Civica in the public's eye and in the forefront. And even if somebody doesn't know anything about the Civica, but they go get a patito, they go, "What's the Civica?" It might trigger somebody wanting to know what we're all about, later on. So
Yeah.
my mom and I want to send compliments to you too, and to thank you for the efforts you put forth for the Union Civica, because in each of our own ways, we're continuing the legacy of our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, and just the effort that they put forth to bring us to where
Amen.
we are today.
Amen. Hallelujah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much again for being with us here tonight, everybody. And thank you to our guests, Maria Elena Sanchez and Ana Sanchez, her daughter. And we will continue on to, be at the table and to promote Latino concerns, contributions, and culture. Thank you again, everybody, for being with me
Thank
here
you.
on Mi Gente on Air. See you next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we off now?
Not quite. My producer walked out of the room, and I don't know where he went. So we're still actually on. Matthew.
Well, Larry. Oh,
We're not off yet.
I know.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's coming in the room right now, and we'll be
Okay.
the live stream. Thank you, everyone.